Okay, so again, thank you very much for joining us today for our first webinar in our Back to Operations webinar series on the topic of facilities. I know everyone here is super excited to get back to skating and planning for the season, all that type of stuff. So we're really excited to have you all here today. We know that the first hurdle for all of you guys to getting back on the ice would be determining whether your facility is going to be opening. So if and or when they're going to be reopening. We have heard from some member clubs regarding this, that they're getting feedback from facilities that they are not allowed to open. So I'm actually going to pass it over to Lisa to speak on the specific legislation surrounding this topic.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the club webinar. Hope everybody's excited about our continued announcement that we're moving forward. And yeah, I get the super exciting stuff talking about the legislation. So I think it's important for all of you to know that we do have a number of municipalities that have already started to move forward with putting in ice across the province. And the key thing that's important for all of you to know and for you to discuss with your facilities is the super exciting, Ontario regulation. This, the specific regulation is 263/20. And that is the regulation that pertains to what's happening in stage 2, which is now for everybody except Windsor. So Windsor, Essex, if somebody is on the phone here, we can talk about what the stage 1, my former favorite, 82/20 says, because that also allows facilities to open. But for everybody else, if you're looking up the regulation to discuss with your facilities, it's 263/20. And what it says in 263/20 is that indoor facilities may open for training and competition for people who are, in our case, member clubs of recognized provincial sport organizations, which all of you are. And the specific area that you want to look at in order to see what is then allowed is, and very important, the overriding piece that's important to us. There's general regulations, and then there are specifics. And the specifics override the general, okay? So if you're reading down, what you want to do is look for section number 13, subsection number 13, refers specifically to what's allowed for sports and fitness. Okay, so under section 13, the key areas are number 5 and number 6. Okay, so it's number 5 that specifically says that facilities for indoor sports that comply with the conditions may open for the purpose of being used for one or more of the following organizations. And one of the organizations that's listed under there would be you, members of PSOs. Then very specifically, so number 5 has to follow the conditions of number 6. And what number 6 lays out is that the only people who can use a facility are people who are members of, basically members of yours in this case. And very importantly, it still says here, and believe me, I know this, it's still sad for people who are looking for training for pairs and dance and synchro, but it still says very specifically here that any person who enters or uses the facility must maintain that physical distance of at least 2 members and no team sports for now. So that's what's allowed. And I see a comment there, municipal facilities have remained closed until at least July 31st. So this doesn't mean that in every municipality they must open their facilities. It means that they may open their facilities. And we have been talking very specifically with the ministry about how this is going to happen and are things going to open. And they have been very clear that they are not going to order facilities to open. That's not in their power, and it's not in our power. What it does mean that we can do is, and what it really relies on, honestly, is a lot of the relationships that you have with your facilities in order to start those conversations. You know, I think the good news is that we have started to set a track record for skating, that we are good and responsible partners with good return to play protocols. You know, because we were able to start with some skaters on the ice in stage 1, we have very successfully, I think, piloted and adjusted our return to play protocol. So we know that we have some good, safe guidelines. And we also have had the ability to run our guidelines through, oh gosh, now my printer starts to print. Sorry if that gets loud. We also have had the ability to talk with the technical director of the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association. And he actually had the opportunity to review our return to play protocols. So I think that, you know, that's a good piece of information for you to have as well when you go to talk to facilities, okay? So we're open, of course, to any other questions about that, but, you know, obviously Sharon and Melissa will be going through some suggestions for, you know, how you now approach your facility, but we want everybody to understand that your facilities are able to open. It's very clear that they are able to open. I guess, and a couple of other things that I think would be of interest to you that we've had questions about is number one, where we're at with regards to advocacy for skating and next steps with the province. And I can confirm that we are in constant contact with the ministry. We've had very specific questions about, you know, now that social bubbles are allowed, that have contact of when can we hope to have these regulations updated to, you know, reflect the ability to start to see some training for pairs, dance, and synchro for people to have close contact. So we're constantly asking about that. And the other thing, of course, that we are always advocating for is for, you know, support for our clubs as we, you know, as we go through this. That is, we don't have good answers on that yet. Of course, all of you are always welcome to use whatever relationships you have in your local area with your local MPPs. But we have certainly been advocating for possible programs or access to grants like the Trillium grant, for instance. You know, could we have access to that for our clubs in order to, you know, support stuff like incremental costs from COVID-19. So we are continuing, I can assure you, we are continuing to advocate for that stuff. We are asking questions. We are working with all of the other provincial sport organizations to ensure that we have a united voice, and we continue to go to the ministry. And you know, as soon as we hear anything more about that, we will let you know. But I can assure you that we are very much continuing to work on that. Okay. So again, I think just happy that we have continued to make steps forward, and that we've been able to demonstrate that we've been able to start skating in a safe way. So looking forward to the opportunity to getting some ice in some more locations so that we're all ready to go. Okay, thanks everyone. And Melissa, back to you.
Perfect. We do have one question, Lisa, from Leanne Sheriff. She's asking about who is the Ontario Ministry Director, and what's her full title?
Sorry, in the ministry, or
is that, I'm assuming that's who Sharon.
Of the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association. We've been dealing with the technical. We've been in communication with the technical director there, and his name is Terry Pichet. And you mean from the facilities, I assume, Leanne? I see your question there. Okay. And I also see the question about insurance for communicable disease. So I know that a lot of towns are asking for that. So what I can tell you is that in our insurance, we never had coverage for communicable disease. So on our end, this is no different than it ever has been. And I can tell you that even organizations who may have had coverage for communicable disease in the past That is a hot, hot topic because in most cases it is being removed. And what we are working for, that's obviously why we've gone the approach of nobody participates in any activities without signing the waiver, right? And I think all of us are aware right now that, there is nothing that you can do out there in the world that doesn't have some level of risk associated to exposure to COVID-19. So that is why, as part of our return to play protocols, it's a non-negotiable that everybody who participates in any activity must sign the COVID-19 waiver, acknowledging that they understand that, even though we have safety protocols, that there will always be some level of risk. So that's why that's mandatory.
Perfect. All right, so we will delve into our presentation now. So just to reiterate what Lisa said, by law, facilities are now able to open, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily all going to open. That's at their discretion. I know that one of the possible contributing factors for especially some of the smaller arenas and areas could be user interest, right? So you guys renting ice, hockey, all the different user groups. So this is where our resource that we created comes into play. We want to enable you to start the conversations by using this resource, and that will help the facility see what type of interest that they have, and then moving forward, see if they're able to viably open. So I will note, I think Sharon noted it in the chat, we have updated the resource as of this morning to include the links to the legislation, both stage 1 and stage 2 that Lisa spoke about. So just be sure to refer back to those if you're looking for that specific legislation links. So I guess the first step in your conversations, even before you start talking to facilities, you guys should be ensuring that you are reviewing the Skate Ontario return to play protocols. You guys need to understand, and you might get questions, you might need clarification, that sort of thing. We're always here to provide that for you, but you guys having a level of understanding of those protocols is essential, so that you can relay that information on to the facilities. And your facilities, once you do start, they are going to require your return to play protocols. So that's the Skate Ontario return to play protocols. And in addition to that, as an appendix in those protocols, your club will also need to start developing your club response plan or skating school response plan. This includes an oversight group, the club and skating school specific protocols, and a communications plan. We will go over the response plan in more detail next week on our webinar, but just take a look at those appendices in the return to play protocols and get familiarized with that, and we'll be able to provide you a little bit more detail next week on those, just so that we're preparing those documents and those procedures so that we are returning to operations in the safest manner possible. The most important thing that we need to be approaching here is the safety of our members. So that should be the first thought in all of your brains when we're going back to ice, is the safety of our members. We've also heard from a couple different areas that there's potentially some approval process that you may have to do with your local public health unit. So just be prepared that in the case that you're asked to do that, you'll have to share the protocols in the club response plan and maybe have a process of approval that you may have to go through in your area. So just be aware of that. Obviously, in the document, we have provided sample questions to start the conversation and guide the conversation with your facilities. There may be additional questions that are specific to your skating club or skating school, but this is just a general starting point for you, and they're all important processes and information to have when you proceed to reopen. And as mentioned in the document, it could be different from municipality to municipality, and processes could be different even facility to facility within the same municipality. So if you're a club who potentially operates out of a couple different arenas, be prepared that there could be slightly different requirements or protocols that are specific to that facility in that case. So just be aware of that and be prepared for that. Sorry, just going over my notes. So yeah, the idea behind this resource and starting the conversation is to, again, start this process. You may not be looking to start this week or next week, but again, starting the process and ensuring that everything is done safely and in a measured manner. By having all of our return to play protocols in your club response plan, it is showing and proving to the facility that you guys are prepared to reopen. And that's a big thing for them. And we are encouraging you, obviously we are here to support you and to answer any questions and provide clarification on documents and that type of thing, but we really are encouraging you guys to work with your specific facilities. You are the ones who have the relationships and are the ones that are on the ground there. So you guys are the ones that have the best, ability to get those answers and to have that relationship. And again, it's important that you guys have those first and foremost for your members' safety. So I guess with that, we will hop into doing some sample questions. So I'm actually going to share my screen. I'm just gonna pop up the questions and Sharon will get started.
Perfect. So the list of questions that we have compiled is some of the things that you're going to want to know when you start making your plan. So things you should be asking them and things you might actually have not thought about in your planning process. So first off, the first one is questions or concerns with the Skate Canada return to play protocols. So after you've provided the documentations that we've listed, you'll be able to engage in questions that you might have for your facility. So begin by making sure they don't have any questions about our protocols. It would be recommended, like Melissa said before, that you know the protocols well before you actually engage in this conversation. And remember that the Skate Ontario return to play protocols are a minimum standard. So the clubs and schools can add any further measures or guidelines in your club and school protocols. I'm trying to think of an example. I know we have been talking to some people that are back on the ice, but there's a couple that they have done that are further than the Skate Ontario ones. They've further restricted. I know one of them was parent access. So there's currently skaters can have a parent or guardian at the arena with them if they're under the age of 18. And they reduced that age, I believe it was 16 for them. So there was no parent or guardians in the facility under that age. So there are things that you can do. For that one, of course, be mindful of age. We're probably not going to do that for 6-year-olds, but let's think about that type of thing. So that is our question 1. We need to get the conversation started there. So question 2, has the ice been removed from your facility? We need to find this out. Many facilities have removed their ice pads months and months ago to save money. And they're going to take some time to prepare the ice if it needs to go back in. So we have had some conversations with clubs that have returned back and some that have engaged in conversations with their facilities. You'll find that some of them will give you different timelines. So we've heard anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks to get their facilities back going. Some of that is them getting their protocols going. Some of it's getting the ice in and getting the staff moving on in the building again. So please be patient with that. It's important to note that you might be the only person or the only user group that is going to be using the facility. So this makes it a really big decision for the facilities to open, as you need to be able to make them money. They need to be able to pay their staff during the hours that you're there and pay for the rink while it's in. We have in our conversations, again, we do have a couple of rinks. We have one for sure that they are the only user group currently permitted to run programming in the facility. Actually, that's a lie. That's 2 of them that I know for sure. So they had to make sure that they had a plan, and they showed how many skaters would be there, how much money they'd be spending, how many hours they would guarantee before the facility would open up for them. So definitely make sure that you're prepared you're patient and that you have a plan for them moving forward. Your plan should include your weekly plan, the number of hours you're going to use, how many days per week this might accommodate, and also the number of skaters that would be participating, and showing that you can pay for that ice by those skaters. This would be something that we would definitely recommend moving forward. Okay. On to number 3, Melissa.
Perfect. So will the facility have parking lot use guidelines? So obviously this is information that is important to have, and you would need to share with your parents and guardians and skaters prior to them arriving. So this is an important piece. So is there a specified pickup and drop off area? Is there spacing that is needed between parked cars? Those types of things are the things that we're trying to get at there. We recommend in our protocols that all warm-ups be done outside the facility, whether that's at home before they come to the rink, or if the rink is allowing warm-ups in the parking lot. So that's a good thing to know if there's a specified area, if there's a field or something like that the facility has designated as a warm-up area for outside of the facility. And then question 4, what are the entry and exit guidelines? This dictates part of your communications plan to your members. Again, super important to know. They need to know what doors are going in, what doors they're coming out. For you guys on the management of it, who is managing the flow within the facility? So is that up to you guys, or is the facility taking care of that? Who, is there tape that's going to go down? Is there arrows for flow? Those types of things are important to know and to be able to communicate out to your members. As Sharon mentioned, potentially facilities will need to have a list of participants or people coming into the building, and that could be every day, that could be for the week, those types of things. And we've heard that different facilities have restricted access to anyone who is only on those lists. So those types of things. So what are those protocols that the facilities are requiring for the entry and exit guidelines? All right, back to you, Sharon.
Perfect. There's a couple questions I think that I can answer in this section, and there's a couple that will come a little bit later in the questions. The warm-up will be later on, Melissa, and Lisa, I can attest to or answer your question now. So the next question in your little survey is how many participants are permitted in the facility. So the current regulation from the province is 10 participants in a group. So with respect to our Skate Ontario policy, the 10 participants includes your coach, your skaters, and your choreographers. Mm-hmm. So the parents, it would be a different side of it, but they're not at the ice. So they need to be in a different location. Your facility will likely give you an idea of where you want that. They may say they have to stand here. They may have to be in a specific area. Lisa, you came on. Do you have anything for that?
I was just going to say I may be repeating for people who've been on some of our other town halls, but think of your gathering as the group of people who came, who have arranged to come together for the purposes of training. So do you have to count the Zamboni driver or the facility manager? No, you just have to physically distance from those people. But the group of people who've come together to train are in your gathering, right? So on that, so think of in that rink, 10 people. You can have, say you have a facility that has 2 pads, you can have another gathering over on the other pad, but the group of people who are there on one ice pad is your group. And I can also answer the question while I'm on. I saw somebody asked if we worked on this with the other sports. I can confirm that we did. So this was worked on with all of the ice sports. We're working hard to make sure that this is as easy as possible for the facilities to open, and we are good partners to work with. So we have actively worked with the hockey, ringette, and speed skating PSOs. So what you're seeing here, and also, as I mentioned, with the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association, they've also seen this list. So we've been working together with, facility experts and all of the other ice sports to gather this tool so that it's as consistent as possible. We want to be good, easy partners to work with. So, you know, yes, I can confirm we have worked with the other sports on this.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. So moving on from there, what happens with your participants permitted in the facility? The facility still has the next veto, it per se. So what that means is some facilities might choose to further restrict gathering sizes. For example, currently we're sitting at 10 people in a gathering, and there's some rinks still operating at a 5 participant max. So they have the option to do that. So we need to be mindful of that and make sure we have the right information. Rinks might have a time frame on that restriction or a specific target that needs to be met before they come back. Of course, this is important information, as you can imagine, as you begin your planning process. Again, financially, the club might have to wait until that they can support the numbers that are needed within the facility. Okay, so guidelines for parent and spectator attendance. In the province of Ontario, in its current stage, skaters under the age of 18 may have one parent or guardian with them in the arena. It's important to find out what the facility guidelines around parents in the building will be. They might have a specific area where you need to watch, or if there's an area they need to wait. So again, one of the ones that we've spoken to, we've been reaching out to the clubs that are in the arenas now, and one of the ones the parents can't watch. So they're in another area of the facility completely. And one of the other ones they can watch at the windows, but there's only one place they can be. So you'll need to make sure that it's clear where the parent or guardian can wait. You can certainly restrict entry to your sessions as well. Just remember to consider the age of the skaters when you're doing that. Okay. Go ahead, Melissa.
Perfect. I'll just make note, we had a question regarding square footage of a complex for the gathering size. We have been told by our lawyer, and it is by law written in the legislation.
Look for 5220. Yeah.
Yep. It is the gathering size. It has nothing to do with the square footage. As long you have to, it's that, and you have to maintain the 6 feet distance of the physical distancing. So we can confirm that.
Can I, and I can also confirm, like, you know, the specific question is about gymnastics. I can't speak to the advice that gymnastics has received. I can speak to the advice that we have received, and in the, you know, the legal opinions that we have are that legislation, the regulation 5220 is very clear that that the gathering size would apply. And the other thing that I think would back up why we wouldn't want to, you know, mess with that is that we have seen already in some rinks that opened where they did not follow that guideline. We have seen a number of some of the private facilities that opened early were closed and fined. So, you know, we do have evidence that a bylaw would also interpret it, that they would interpret it that way.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so we'll go on to number 7. So does the facility foresee any changes in traditional ice use rental times? So this has to do with cleaning protocols. So will the cleaning protocols be included in your rental? So you're an hour, you usually skate for 50 minutes of that hour, 10 minutes is the flood. Is that going to be extended? Is that going to be part of that? Or is the cleaning time going to be outside of that? We've been hearing anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes for a sanitation process on a rink. And we've heard, you know, part of it is to be done by the facility, and, you know, 100% by the facility. Some are done partially by the facility and partially by the users. So those are things to be thinking about. And then question 8 is using user guidelines, same along the lines of this one. So user guidelines for cleaning and disinfecting. So again, we've heard, you know, facility does the whole thing. As soon as you're off the ice, they do the whole thing. And we've heard from other ones where the facility will do the general cleaning, and then on the boards where skaters may have put their water bottle, that type of stuff, it's of the responsibility of the skating club to wipe that down. And so that is something you need to work through with your facility.
And I can say, looking at the legislation, who has where responsibility for following safety standards is designated is with the facility. So yes, you need to have that conversation with them, but ultimately they are the ones who, you know, they are given the responsibility to make sure that those safe standards are in place, which again is, you know, why this conversation ahead of time is very important. But to be clear, they will not or should not be saying to you, you know, you guys figure it out for safety. Like it's very clear that they are to be responsible for that.
Yes, definitely. So they're responsible for putting the guidelines in. What that guideline is, if it is that you need to wipe down the boards where your stuff was, that's something that they would mandate in their protocols and processes. And something to consider here, to ask, is who is responsible for paying for those sanitation products. So if you have to wipe down the boards, are you guys supplying the wipes, that type of thing, or is the facility? So that's something to be asking. Okay, back to you, Sharon.
All right, perfect. So moving on to question 9, guidelines for office use and equipment storage. And I can cover dressing rooms in here as well. So most clubs have spaces for office use or storage or both, or coach's room or whatever they might be. With respect to office use, we're going to continue to recommend that clubs operate virtually as much as you can, honestly, as much as possible. But some facilities have different guidelines for office and storage use. So some of them will allow you into the offices and you can do social distancing processes from there. Others are not allowing use of the club offices. So you'll need to make sure that you have alternate processes in place for registration, etc. Same thing goes for storage. There may not be the access that you need. It should be. We haven't heard of any clubs yet that aren't allowed into their storage rooms. But that's something we need to think about just in case there is not. Skaters might need to look after their own teaching aids. You know, for example, they might need to carry their own ball or squeaker and be responsible for that during this time, just temporarily, as it won't be able to go into storage. But there's definitely make sure we ask that question. Dressing rooms in this current stage are still closed. It's just the washrooms that are open right now. So the dressing room use is not there. Okay, warm-ups. We're going to go back to the warm-up activity guidelines within the facility. So again, some facilities are allowing skaters to warm up inside the facility. Typically, they are given an assigned location. So you'll definitely need to check in with your facility to see if there's a location, what type of protocols they'd like you to follow. From our end, we want you to make sure that it's supervised, that there's somebody there to make sure that social distancing protocols are being followed. Some facilities, however, may not allow warm-ups inside, so you'll have to make sure that the skaters are warmed up before they get into the arena. Okay. I'm thinking if I missed anything there. And the question about warm-ups inside was bad weather related. Do you remember that question here, Melissa?
Yeah, they were just asking if warm-up would be, we recommend, in our Skate Ontario protocols, we recommend warming up outside the facility. Obviously, in the case where it's raining or there's extreme heat, those types of things, the facility could offer indoor warm-up areas, but we don't recommend it. We recommend warming up outside, just to be safe and to ensure that you're able to keep your physical distancing.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead, Melissa.
Alrighty. So question 11. So what are the regulations for outside food and drink within the facility? So this has to do a lot more with disposal of waste, right? So most people would bring a water bottle, that type of thing. So are those allowed? Where are they allowed to be stored? Those types of things are the questions to be asked. You know, skaters who maybe normally grab a sports drink from the vending machine when they get to the facility, those are types of things it may or may not be available to them. So those are the types of things to be asking. Disposal of waste. So if you have a water bottle or if you have Kleenex, those types of things, what are the guidelines for the facility? Are there designated containers to throw it away in, or do you have to take it with you outside the facility and dispose of it outside of the facility? Question 12, so first aid and emergency evacuation guidelines. Your club and skating school emergency action plans will need to be updated to reflect the new requirements due to COVID. That's something that you guys need to look at and potentially be working with your facility on also to include any of their guidelines for that. First aid kits.
Can I just stop you for a second just to
Yep.
change the next group of questions on your screen?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Totally forgot about that. So first aid kits will need to be accessible for your programming. So depending on your office allowance, the actual, arena office, that type of thing, this may need to be something that's, brought on by the coach on each session. We've heard different protocols also when it comes to this, where if there's a suspected or a confirmed case from a user who used the facility, there could potentially be a shutdown, or what is the process when something like that happens. I've heard from one facility that it will be a 48-hour minimum mandatory shutdown. The entire facility shut down and it is sanitized. So those are the types of things that you'll need to know in the case something like that comes up, and how you communicate that out to your members. So just be prepared for that and informed of where you're going to get that, who's going to get that information, how it's going to get out to your members. So question 13. So what are the guidelines for accident and incident reports? Depending on, some facilities may have requirements that have changed. We need to also ensure that any club administrator or school administrator is still submitting any incident reports to Skate Canada as soon as possible. And so that may be, we recommended in the past that you have a physical copy next to the boards, and it might be that each individual coach that's on the ice has their own copies, and they keep that and they send the picture to your club administrator or whoever is going to submit that to Skate Canada. So just be thinking about those types of processes. So question 14, what are the penalties for facilities and or clubs in schools for non-compliance of protocols? This is something, as Lisa mentioned, we've heard of facilities getting huge fines and being shut down. So it's important to know and comply with all of the rules and regulations of Skate Ontario, our return to play protocols, but also your facilities guidelines. And it's important that every single user, so all your members, if there's parents allowed, those types of things, that everyone knows the process and requirements to prevent any type of non-compliance with any of these rules and regulations. And it depends. It depends on how that facility is going to deal. Is that going to be a portion that gets passed down to users? And is that going to be only to the users where the infraction was found to be, or is it going to be to all users who use the facility? How that fine potentially could be passed down to you guys at the club level. So these are things to be thinking about. And our last kind of general question, obviously there could be other ones that you guys come up with, but in our sample questions, the last one is just, does the facility have any other requirements of the user groups that you guys need to be aware of? Just important to ensure that everything is, as comprehensive as possible, and that everything is done in a safe manner. Because as I've mentioned before, the safety of your members and your skaters and their parents are of the utmost importance during this time. So yeah, so at this point, so we've gone through basically our resource and all of our sample questions. Sharon, is there any of the chat questions that we haven't gotten to yet?
It's a phenomenal question. I have been trying to keep up to date on them, but they're going by so quickly. I think we have done most of them. Anything else that might not be there would be return to play related, not necessarily facility.
So if anybody has any final questions, again, as we mentioned before, we're trying to keep this webinar to strictly facilities. Any other questions with return to play, those types of things, we'll follow up with you if you left a comment or if you submitted a question to us on the registration that's not pertinent to facilities, and we'll connect with you. And then also next week, our webinar is on facilities, or sorry, not facilities, that's this week, return to play protocols, club protocols, so talking about that club response plan, and we have a club checklist that has been updated with some COVID considerations for you guys to take a look at. So that's what our topic is next week. So we'll be tackling a lot of those questions. Have you seen any other questions, Sharon?
So we could answer Lisa's question. No, the ice is your surface. So that is your gathering. Okay. So did you already introduce next week's?
I did, sorry.
Okay. No, I'm just making sure. That's awesome. That's okay. And we are working on some resources. So in the future, we have a couple, I shouldn't say a couple, we have many more of these webinars coming up. Like she said, the next one will cover some more return to play protocols. So there are still lots of questions around return to play and how that works in your arena and that kind of stuff. So next week, we're going to cover a ton of that. Also helping clubs get started on their response plan with the checklist. So the checklist that Melissa was talking about is the one that's already published. So we already have a checklist that has published for clubs to use day to day. And this one's going to include all of the COVID considerations that we can think of. So we have a club working group that's helping us out with this to see if we've missed anything, but making sure we're trying to think about all the things you need to think about, even just a bit, the cost or scheduling or how we're going to enter and exit the arena, at your facility. Those types of things. So we're definitely looking forward to seeing you guys there for that one. You can also send in your questions in advance for that. If you sent in a question and we didn't respond to it here, it either wasn't facility related or we need to get the answer. So we will get those answers and get back to you. And then we will see you next week. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.